All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back, and we are joined after that great conversation with Andy McCarthy by Brent Budowsky, political opinion writer and blogger for thehill.com. And we welcome you, sir.
Pleasure to be here.
Well, it's my pleasure. All right, let's start with, and I know we have a soundbite of Rand Paul talking about Vladimir Putin, talking about Russia, actually criticizing some of his colleagues in the U.S. Senate. And why don't can we get 33 and can we play that for Mr. Budowsky here? I want you to listen to what Rand Paul had to say. Here we go.
Ukraine has a long history of being, either part of the Soviet Union or within that sphere, common language, etc. So I don't think it also behooves us to tell the Ukraine what to do, or to, I'm not excited about saying, hey, let's put the Ukraine in NATO to rub Russia's nose in it. I think we should trade with them. If they want to be part of the EU, I think that's fine also. So trade is good, but I think trying to rub Russia's nose in it with say, oh, they need to be part of NATO or a military alliance is not a good idea.
All right, so Brent, you've talked about in your writings Rand Paul's Putin problem. So did that reinforce it there?
Oh, yeah. I thought what he said, what Rand Paul said, was outrageous and, frankly, ignorant. I think the Obama administration has been weaker than I would be. I think the Republicans in Congress, with the exception of some like John McCain, have been weaker than I would be. I think Prime Minister Cameron and Chancellor Merkel have been weaker than I would be. And I think Rand Paul is living on another planet with what he just said.
Yeah, well, on foreign policy, it appears that maybe the apple doesn't fall far from the tree when it comes to his dad and him, and them being a little out of sync, shall we say, with the foreign policy of the Republican Party and most conservatives. But he did say that, and I had Ron Johnson on talking about this. He did say that some of his colleagues are stuck in the Cold War mentality. Well, I mean, it's going to be pretty hard if he's running for president to take Hillary Clinton and the administration to task for blowing the quote-unquote reset with Russia. If you're criticizing those who would like to at least do something more than, as you alluded to, the aforementioned list have done, how are you going to reconcile those two things?
No, I don't believe that Senator Paul, whatever his other virtues may be, and I agree with him on many of the NSA issues, by the way, but I think his position on Ukraine, his position on Iran, his position on the use of force is so incoherent and weak that I do not believe he will be a credible presidential candidate based on the things that he's been saying recently. It's a dangerous world, Steve. And Vladimir Putin is a relic from the 1930s. He is a pathological liar who recently admitted that he was lying when he said that there were no Russians in Crimea. Nobody's telling Ukraine what to do. They are pleading with us for help, for support, for military aid, and for tougher sanctions. So I don't know what Rand Paul is talking about when he says those things. And with all due respect to him, I don't think he knows either.
Yeah, well, it always, scared me a little bit when his father, during the presidential race of 2012, said, well, why can't Iran have a bomb? We have a bomb. And I never understood how anybody who, cherishes our freedom and our safety and security could ever seriously take and vote for a presidential candidate who would say something like that. But let's talk about Putin. Putin, it's interesting. Richard Cohen in the Washington Post, and I'm looking for the quote, he talked about this gentleman who is the head of a think tank that's very closely associated with Putin, wrote a response in answer to critics who make the Hitler Putin analogy, at least for reasons for going in, this Russian-speaking, German-speaking, etc. And he said, one must distinguish between Hitler before 1939 and Hitler after 1939. The thing is that Hitler collected German lands. I mean, if this is a true reflection of the mindset of Putin, he's not stopping.
Oh, I don't believe he's going to stop until he fears that he's going to meet resistance. What I have advised people in the U.S. government to do, and I know many of them, one of whom is very, very high level, we need to make it clear to Putin unequivocally that the West, the U.S., Europe, will enact sanctions that will include oil, gas, banking, minerals, arms sales, totally and completely, if they don't back off. And we need to make it clear to Putin, which we are not doing now. We're now doing the opposite, frankly, that we will impose those sanctions. The blunt fact, Steve, about those sanctions, it will hurt the United States a little. It will hurt the Europeans a little more. There is a price that has to be paid. It will decimate and destroy the Russian economy, and there will be people surrounding the Kremlin angry at Putin for the economic damage that he will have caused. The problem we have now is when the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and the Washington Post all report within the last week that John Kerry and DOD have advocated stronger sanctions but have been overruled by the White House, that is an advertisement for Putin to take as much as he will get, which I believe he will do, unless he develops a respect for us that he does not have right now. And when Rand Paul comes in and makes absurd statements like he makes, that is an advertisement for appeasement.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't agree with you more. I also want to talk a little bit about a piece that you wrote about a week or so ago, which I found very, very interesting, how you say history to impeach Roberts. And you talk about, your reasons for that statement. And I think most people could guess what those reasons are to a certain extent, at least what they center around. Talk about that.
Well, I happen to believe that it is a curse on American democracy that the wealthiest people in America are given the legal ability to spend as much as they want to buy elections. Now, what I would be for, and I advocated this in the column, is a constitutional amendment that would simply ban that corporations are not people, that campaign reform of some kind, limits of some kind, are needed. I would include that liberal billionaires and conservative billionaires should be treated the same way. I think big money, no matter where it comes from, distorts and warps the system. When the Supreme Court says that money is speech, then we don't have equality of citizenship. We have money dominating democracy. And I would argue that this city, and where I am now in Washington, D.C., is corrupt to the core by money. I think many Democrats as well as Republicans are complicit in this. In fact, my column that's going up momentarily on the Hill, literally momentarily, is about Elizabeth Warren, who I think is about to emerge as a major national star. But I think when John Roberts basically legalizes with his court the buying of elections, that is an open invitation to basically corrupt democracy. And again, whether it's the left or the right, the liberals or the conservatives, I believe in one person, one vote, not the guy with the most money buying senators, whether they're buying Democrats or Republicans, Congress or the president.
All right, but and you know what I was going to say is most people would have thought that based on that column or that title of your column, you would have been talking about his vote, changing his vote on Obamacare, but you weren't. You were talking about this. But let me ask you this and play devil's advocate here.
Sure.
And to be honest with you, this is where I'm coming from, sort of. You know, you talk about money. People who are wealthy enough to own newspapers, for instance, or as they used to exist, and control the editorial board and editorial plank of a newspaper, or people who own radio stations or television stations and can staff it the way they want and put the political bent they want. I mean, that's just another avenue for wealthy people to have more of a say than the guy who's working in a factory, but it exists. I mean, where would you draw the line?
Well, what I would draw the line in is the ability to give money to politicians. If you walk up to a senator with a wheelbarrow full of cash and say, vote for me, and vote for my bill, and I'll give you this money, which is the functional equivalent of what they do now. They just do it with checks at fundraisers when most people aren't allowed to be there. It would be called bribery. Now, by the way, on Obamacare, real quick, we don't have time for extended discussion. I'm a single-payer guy. I reluctantly hold my nose, on Obamacare. But to me, it's a close legal call. I have a problem with the government ordering people to buy a private sector product and then fining them if they don't buy it. So on that one, actually, my position, I'm not totally friendly with the Roberts case.
But you're not far off. Yeah.
No, I understand that problem. I don't like the idea of the government. If you believe in your product, in this case Obamacare, you should let people judge to buy it or not buy it, not tell them they pay a fine to the government for buying a private sector product. I love it to be in any business where I can fine you if you don't buy my product.
Right, and then of course all the ramifications that we've
it's
seen
a close
since.
call for me, constitutionally.
Okay, fair enough, Brent. And listen, a pleasure talking to you, Brent Budowsky from thehill.com. We'll check out. I'd love to talk to you further about Elizabeth Warren, and maybe next week we could do that. She has not flat out said, I will not run for president. She keeps saying, I'm not running. And when they ask her about Hillary, oh, Hillary's great. but she doesn't say she'd make a great president. Anyway, Brent, great to talk to you, sir. We'll check out that new column at thehill.com. Thank you.
Take care. Catch you later.
Okay, bye-bye. Great conversation. I'd love to have him back next week. Okay, folks, when we come back, you know what it is. It's Gimme 5. You're not going to want to miss this one. I got to say, they're all pretty good. By the way, big news, Apple splitting, from what I understand, 7-1 and upping the dividend. We'll talk about that maybe later, too. Steve Malzberg Show.
We don't just talk about the news, we talk to those making news. This is the Steve Malzberg Show.